Welcome to Lifestyle Tonik. This podcast focuses on the refreshing and restorative role that mental health, wealth, leadership, and culture has on our everyday life. Exploring subjects centered around 4 areas of life that will strengthen, refresh, and restore you as a good tonic should. Here is your host, an entrepreneur, a proven leader, and a certified business coach, Mr. Keith Lamont McMillan. Welcome to this episode of Lifestyle Tonik, mental health, wealth, leadership, and culture. And today we are privileged to have with us a special guest all the way from Virginia. But before we hear from her, we just want to remind you guys that Lifestyle Tonik, mental health, wealth, leadership, and culture, we focus on 4 different themes. And today our theme is going to be focused on mental health. You know, back in 2016, I lost my mom to schizophrenia and dementia. And so we started a nonprofit foundation called the Katie Mack Foundation. The Katie Mack Foundation is basically a resource. It's a nonprofit resource that provides mental health resources for our communities. And we go across the communities just trying to share as much information that we can, especially the African American community, because when I grew up, we had so many myths, so many things that we just did not understand about mental health. And so today we have a guest with us who sort of experienced some similar situations, but she's also working in the area of mental health as well. And so at this time, we are going to hear from Miss Tanya Bishop. So Miss Bishop, tell us just a little bit about who you are. Just about who you are and what you do there in the Virginia area.
Okay, well, like you said, my name is Tanya Bishop. I am a mother. I am a grandmother. I am a wife-to-be. I have a brother. It's just 2 of us. And so my journey with mental health started when I was working in the jail. I do have a degree in criminal justice, specialty police science, and I also have a degree in psychology. Okay. And my journey kind of started when I saw my grandmother, who also suffered from dementia, and we didn't understand it then. And so I just wanted to combat those myths about mental health and dementia and the things that we have in our community going on. And working in the system, in the legal system, I did see a lot of people with mental health. So I just want to combat some of those myths that are out there about people with mental health and mental diseases. So it makes me passionate about helping people with those struggles, to let them know that there are skills and tools to help them combat this mental health. And to also, if you don't have the skills and tools, that there are therapists that help us and life coaches. So I just want to help people that are struggling with this issue to know that there is help out there.
Gotcha. Now, since you mentioned myths, what are some of those myths out there that you've encountered as it relates to mental health?
Some of the things are in our community, especially, is it's nothing wrong with them. They can snap out of it. Another is it's nothing I can do. Children don't suffer with mental health or depression, things like that. Or people with mental health issues can't work and live a productive life. So those are just some of those things that are just not true. And mental health is, and I want to pause because there is a difference between mental health and mental illness. And mental health is a state of well-being in which a person realizes their own abilities, but they can cope with the normal days, normal stresses of life. They can work, they can be fruitful in their community. Now, when you're dealing with mental illness, that is a diagnosable disease, which is from bipolar, schizophrenia, behavioral disorder, and it's just the opposite of mental health. Is you can't cope with the days of the stresses of life, and you can't function, you can't have those relationships and social relationships, and that's when you need to be diagnosed. And a lot of times we're not diagnosed. We just kind of put those things aside. And in our community, it's pray away. We can pray it away. Go to church, pray it away. You can snap out of it, get yourself together. And instead of recognizing the problem, it doesn't get better by putting those people away, sitting them in a back room or sending them to church, because sometimes you need that professional help. And that's something that we don't get in our community because of the stigma. If you go see a therapist, if you go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you must be crazy. And that's just not true.
And now, just for clarity's sake, I know you mentioned our community. Now, specifically, and I'm guessing you're talking about the African American community.
Yes.
Okay. So we could be a little candid here. We're talking about, because in our community, in our African American community, you are absolutely correct. We have those stigmas that's been associated with it, and we don't want to seek help. And a lot of times, I don't know if it's that we just don't want to, or we're just not aware of. First of all, we don't understand it, right? We don't understand mental health, mental illnesses, and so when we see these things and when we see things that we don't understand, so often we just sort of let's just pray about it. Let's just let's just take it to the altar. They'll be okay, and not really understanding that there might be some additional help. I mean, just think about it. If we get sick, we go to the doctor most times, but with mental illness, we don't understand that is or can't, that we don't know that those things are sicknesses, but I like the fact that you did differentiate between, your mental health and a mental illness, because a mental illness that you said, those are some things that can be diagnosed, through the right people. But then again, with doing mental health, you can be stressed out. That's something that, you may not get a diagnosis for being stressed, but you have to be able to recognize the symptoms. I remember a time for me, I was working a job. I've been there for about 6 years, and I used to love my job. I mean, and I still love the job, but I guess it got to a point to where it just began to get stressful. I mean, it was at a point to where when I get off work, I'm happy, I'm joyful. I get off work at night. So when I get up in the morning, I have to be at work from 10. So I work like from 10 to 7. And so I would go to work, I'm excited about getting there. But I promise you, as soon as I turned on the street, it's like something just came over me. And that was going on for at least about a month or so before I said, okay, something's not right, And so I ended up going to, I went to several doctors because I started getting pain, like for real. I started having shoulder pains, muscles started tensing up and stuff like this. And so I didn't know what was going on. So I kept going to the doctor and they couldn't find anything, right? They gave me some muscle relaxers, but even that didn't really work for me, So eventually my doctor was like, and she started talking to me about, what's going on in my life. And I was just telling her some things. I didn't think nothing about it. At that time I was in school. I was going to school full time. I was supervising, and some other financial situations was going on. So all this stuff was going on, but I didn't take it into account. But she said, you know what, let me schedule you an appointment to go to talk to somebody. And lo and behold, I ended up going, and I believe that those were the first, because I ended up going once, I think I went 3 times. Okay. And those were the best 3 visits that I had with actually talking with a counselor, and that's something that we don't do, especially African Americans,
right?
Males.
Yes.
We don't do that, but then one thing that, and this was a white female. This was a white female that I went to go and talk to. And one thing that she said, and it sort of stuck with me, one thing that she said, and she was, of course, she was a counselor. I think she was good at what she did. But she was a little, she just really didn't know how to address me. But she came on out, she came on out. She said, well, Keith, sometimes in the African American community, especially males, one of the things that she's seen a lot in her life is that African American males tend to want to take everything up on their shoulders because they feel like they have to, you know, and it's not just because they're wanting to, but it's just in their culture to do it, you know. And she sort of explained to me that that's why a lot of times we have a lot of the things that's going on in our communities, more than like when we talk about diabetes and high blood pressures and stuff like that. She was, you know, that was my first introduction to this whole mental health piece. But that sort of stuck with me. And so after that, I started looking into it a little bit more. And, you know, and from what I found, it seemed to be true, you know. And so with that in mind, I mean, have you ever had to speak to a counselor, or, you know, what was your first encounter? You mentioned that your grandmother, I believe, had passed, and that's sort of what got you interested in it. So how did you cope, or what did you do?
Well, when my grandmother passed, I was also working at the jail.
Okay.
And just like you, when I first got there, because, you know, legal, I was just into legal stuff. I wanted to be this and this and this and this. And then once I got there, it's like all this pressure. And I started getting sick too. And I was going to the doctor, and I started putting on weight, and my hair started falling out, and I wasn't going into menopause. And so I ended up having high blood pressure. I ended up taking fluid pills, everything. And nobody was diagnosing me the correct way. And I would go to work and feeling like you, I just felt like the world was on my shoulders as soon as I got there. But then with me, when I got home, it just didn't go away. And that got worse and worse and worse until I went to a doctor, and mine was biological, but it came from the stresses of that job, which caused me to end up having a tumor too. And so once they removed the tumor, I left the job first. They removed the tumor, all that stress went away. I lost weight, everything started falling back. And a lot of times your mental health affects your physical health as well. And they kind of run hand in hand. Oh, and wow. I want to say something about the therapist. A lot of times we don't go because we don't see people that look like us. So they don't feel like they're going to understand our plight and what's really going on in our culture, in our community. They're not going to understand because they can't relate to it. So that's another reason why people like us don't go see therapists and psychologists, because it's not a lot of us that's there.
That you are. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I'm glad you picked that up too, because, you know, I went to a white woman, you know, and that's all that was available. You know, there were no black men, you know, that I could really just go and sit down and talk to. I mean, there just wasn't. I mean, maybe they were, but I didn't know of them, you know. Right. And so you're absolutely correct. And those are, and again, that goes back into some of those stigmas, you know, that we were talking about, and those myths and stuff. You're right. I mean, I'm so glad that you hit on that. Oh, yes, wow.
The dementia, because I didn't know about it. I didn't want to accept it. Because I'm trying to figure out, how does she go from being okay and knowing us to, like, really a few days later, she just don't know us. And it's a process, you know, that dementia, Alzheimer, it's a process that happens over time. And it's just like recovery. That's a process that happens over time. It's not going to happen overnight. So until we recognize these things, and we go to a therapist or a psychologist to recognize something that is wrong, we can't get the help that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow.
And with children, a lot of times these things happen. They can be behavioral. They can be chemical, biological, hereditary. It can be in our genes. And so my thing is, in our community, is we know, as a mother, you know when something's not right with your child. Instead of saying, oh, he'll grow out of it, or he'll be okay, because children go through things too. They get depressed, things get on their mind, they're going to school, sometimes they're getting bullied for whatever reason. They don't always share with us what's going on. And what I started doing was, because I have 4 children, and they would talk to each other. And I've always had a policy, you know, you can talk to me about anything but certain things, because they know the mama bear will come out and I'm gonna handle it, you know. So what I did was, we would be at the dinner table, and I would listen to their conversation. And that's how I figured out some things. And like my oldest son had a bout of depression, and that's how I figured that out. And I'm like, so as a mother, what do you do? And so I started sitting down talking to him about it. And no, he never went to see a therapist while he was at home, but when he got to college, he saw someone. And I was in full support of it, because if I can't help you, maybe there's someone that can, because not all times they want to share with their parent what's going on. So my thing is, I support you either way. Just if you need help, just get the help that you need. And yeah, I have you, and I'm going to support you either way.
And that's powerful right there. And I'm glad that you said that, because in my experience, from what I've seen, that's just what we don't do. I mean, first of all, we don't want our kids talking to just anybody, right. You know, most time, but because we don't know. Well, for one, we don't know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't know what we don't know. But there are people out there who have much more experience in talking things out and talking through and understanding situations. But a lot of times we don't know that. And so we don't want our kids to go and just to talk to anybody. So right now I work at a university, and we do have those supports. You know, there we have it for the faculty, and we have those supports for the young people as well. But, you know, they still have to sort of deal with these stigmas of going to talk to them, because the support is there. I mean, we got some qualified, we got some clinical folks, you know, we got people. And since I said that, let me just put a little thing right here. Now, I'm not a doctor. We're not doctors. So whatever we say on here today, you know, please go seek professional advice. You know, we're not trying to proclaim that we have medical degrees, because I'm not, you know, but we're just talking about life. You know, we're just talking about situations in which we've experienced. So I just thought I'd put that plug in there. But we do have resources like on campus and stuff like that our young people can go to, which I think that they do a pretty good job if the students go to them. You know, you talked a little bit about dementia, and you said that one of the things you said, it was a process. You know, I can remember. So this is my experience. This when I first found out that my mom was diagnosed. Right. This is what happened. It was about 1:30 in the morning. My brother calls me on my cell phone, wakes me up. He calls, and he says, "Here, Keith, let me let you talk to Daddy." And it's 1:30 in the morning. I'm like, okay, what is going on? And so my dad is on the phone. You know, he's like, "Well, son, here, talk to your mama. Talk to your mama." I'm like, okay, what's going on? And so they wouldn't tell me what's all going on, but they were like, "Well, just talk to your mom. Talk to your mom." And so I'm like, okay. So she's sort of frantic at the time, and she had got to a point. Well, once they told her that I was on the phone, she got scared. It was like, whoa, no. I could hear her in the background. I'm like, okay, what's going on? And so she got scared, and she actually ran from my dad. So at this time, she had got up in the middle of the night and walked out of the house. He was walking down the street, and so and so she had been talking about me, but she didn't want to hear me. And so, you know, she didn't just want to hear me. She had been talking about it, but she didn't want to talk to me on the phone. And so she had gotten scared, and so she ran from them. And so, of course, we later on we found out what was going on, and so we ended up putting her in an institution for, you know, to try to get some help. But when I think about that, I was thinking about, okay, now how did this start? Like, you know, and I didn't know nothing about mental illness then, not a whole lot. It was at that point to where I started talking to more people. I started doing some more reading and researching and trying to figure out what is going on with my mom, you know. And so and so with that, after I started realizing what was going on, especially with her dementia. And so my mom had dementia and schizophrenia. And so dementia was causing her to forget things, forget who you are. But that schizophrenia piece was also tying in to where, if something wasn't the way she wanted it, she was scared. She was scared to death. And so I was thinking about some of this stuff, and back to what you were saying, it's a process. I can remember my mom, she was always saying, well, who moved my purse? Well, I know somebody moved my purse. And then later on she'll find it and where it was, it wasn't here a while ago. I know somebody moved. If you didn't move it today, you're going to move it. Just little stuff like that. And we didn't think nothing about it. This was just a part of common conversation, so it was just little stuff like that when I think back on it, it was coming up, right? It was coming up, but it wasn't really relevant to us because we didn't know to look out for those things. We didn't know what was going on, but I can recall those processes that you were talking. Those were some of the small things that I can recall. Now, do you recall anything like that?
Yes, my grandmother, she dipped snuff and she chewed tobacco. Okay. And so she would put her little snuff can up, and she couldn't find it, or her puzzle book, or something that she had, and she'd be looking for it, and she would say, well, anyway, and it'd be like, okay. And then she'd go back and she would have it, and it would be like little small things like that. Or she'll say, well, I don't know what in the world I did with such and such. And it's like, well, it's right there. And well, I didn't put it there. And like you said, who moved it? And so, but that was, you kind of like target that to being old. Well, she just, because that's what we've been taught, that, okay, that's just a part of getting old, and not knowing that probably was a part of the dementia process. And how we found out she failed trying to get her snuff. She fell down, and she didn't go to the hospital that day. She went the next day, and she never came back home. And so it was like in the hospital. And see, I had looking at it like, are y'all doing everything you can to help her? Because the thing that the doctor said that upset me was her brain was like mush. So I'm like, what do you mean? And how, no bedside manner at all. So I kind of got offended. And then looking back, it's like, they don't know how to talk. Sometimes they don't know how to talk to us or relay certain things to us. And to say that her brain was like mush, to me, was what made me very offensive. And then she never came. She was going back and forth from the hospital to the nursing home. And it was like, she would know you one day. The next day it was over. She didn't know who you was. Then she stopped talking. She stopped talking, and she would just nod her head. And the next day she was gone, and that happened over a period of couple of months. And so, and like I said, sometimes it's genetic. Her older sister passed away the same way. She fell, went to the nursing home, and she never came home. And come to find out, she was suffering from dementia too. So sometimes these things are genetic, and we just don't know, because, you look at my grandma was 80-some years old when she passed away. How do we have a way of knowing if they were never diagnosed to know that this is a part of our gene makeup?
There you go. You're right.
So it's very important to get these things diagnosed when we sense something is wrong. It's better to know than not know. And so, and looking at children during the pandemic, with all these things happening with the kids and with older people not being able to be social, that plays a part on your mental health as well, because, we're social people. And being that you can't be social, you can't touch anybody, you can't hug. And then if you're older and you maybe have underlying health issues, you don't want to take that chance. And when you can't interact with people on a social level like that, that can play a part on your mental health as well.
So, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Into the pandemic, this has been a stressful, that first year. Oh my gosh, yes. Coming out of 2020, I mean, we just got into 2020, and in March, everything just, so that was a whole new world, for everybody. It impacted everybody, right? It just wasn't just one person. And it was definitely something that was new for everybody, adjustments and making changes and just sort of dealing with the process. That was stressful, and having kids out of school, for almost a year, I could only imagine. Now, since you mentioned that, what are some, first of all, what was your experience in this pandemic? But did you have stressful moments? Yes, you say you had 4 kids before, what were some of their experiences? What did you have to do? What were some things that you did to sort of help keep the family together?
I have 3 older kids. I have a 32-year-old, a 26-year-old, and
okay.
24 and a 11-year-old.
Okay.
So the older kids were still working.
Okay.
And so it was like, make sure you put your mask on, make sure you wash your hands, make sure you stay 6 feet apart, because they were still going out there. I was able to work from home. Plus, my mom passed at the end of 2019. So I went from that grief process right into the pandemic.
Right. Oh, wow.
So it was like a whole whirlwind of emotions going on with me, and then taking care of my dad.
Okay.
So I was able to work from home. My son was at home. So that was a good thing. The good thing that we didn't have to go out and be a part of the world, so to speak. But I still had kids that were going out. My fiance was still going out. And because their job was considered, I guess, essential.
Essential. Mm-hmm.
And so, just trying to make things, take your clothes off. I think I went into like a little paranoia state for a little while, take your shoes off, because they were saying you can carry it here in your clothes and all of this.
That.
And then it was like, calm down. You're getting a bit out of hand with the paranoia. And so it was like, just make sure you wash your hands, keep your mask on, stay 6 feet apart, and I had to come to the conclusion, we can't stop living because of this pandemic, because this is not the first pandemic that's ever happened in the world. So we can't stop living our lives and being in fear and cooped up in the house. We can go outside, but we just can't be congregated in social gatherings like we used to. So we still went out, to the parks, and we would go out and drive out and do things together, but we just weren't as social as we used to be. So that was the part of keeping us kind of like still family organized in a sense, but still just being precautious at what's out there, because you never know, what somebody has. And then, you had these people that were not wearing a mask, that was their right. And they would cough and do things, purposely. And so I was like, just be careful. I went out early in the morning to grocery shop or late at night. I made sure I didn't go when there were big crowds, huge crowds around, to just try to stay as safe as possible, but not live in fear at the same time.
Gotcha. Yes, indeed. So, so I definitely understand it. Like you, we just trying to be extra cautious. But it was a stressful moment at one point. I mean, because we just were uncertain about a lot of stuff. And so that I know that did bring a lot of stress upon not only me, but some of the young people as well. Working in higher ed, even working in K-12. A lot of students were impacted. So I definitely understand that. Now we had a couple of set questions. And I think that we've covered quite a bit of them. I was going to talk about what makes you so passionate about mental health. I think that you've shared that with us. We were going to talk about some of the myths of mental health, and you shared that with us. How does mental health impact our communities and our families? I think we talked about a little bit about that, especially the African American families, and we shared some life experiences for both of us. So what are some tips on maybe enhancing our emotional and our mental health? What are some tips that you use and that you think that we might be able to benefit from for our listeners?
I think improving our health and wellness. I think with this pandemic going on and being in the house, people got sedentary and we're sitting around. Just get out, being as healthy as possible, moving around, eating better, because, you know, when you're sitting around in the house, you want to just eat everything. And I think we have to improve our wealth and healthness to improve our mental health. Because like I stated earlier, if your mind isn't well, your physical body isn't well either. And to have a self-directed life, get out there and do some things, engage in some meaningful daily activities, whether it's, you know, some people like to journal, some people like to paint, music, some people like to read, and just be productive, even if it's helping people. I like to help people. I like to talk to people. So sometimes that can help our mental health, because when we're talking to other people, that helps us as well. And so just engaging and having a better self-directed life, because like I said, recovery is possible when you're dealing with mental health issues, and building relationships and social relationships out in the community, as well as personal relationships, can help, I think, have a great impact on mental health.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So when I reached out to you, I saw that you were a life coach.
Yes.
I saw that you were, I think you have another podcast interview coming up.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have another one coming up, and that's how I found you. And I wanted to definitely have a conversation with you regarding mental health, because that was my passion, and I found that was your passion as well. And so, as a life coach, tell me a little bit about your life coaching. What do you do with that? And share with us how people can get in touch with you if they need your life coaching services.
Okay, I got involved with life coaching because, like I said, I lost my mom at the end of 2019 in that grief process. And so, again, where do you go to talk that out? Who do you talk to? And, you know, in the grief process is something that happens. It's a different process for everybody. And so I was just having a hard time with it. And I found myself getting depressed and just being in a slump, and I didn't want to be there. And so I happened to see Alyssa's thing on Facebook, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to it. And I went to it, and I saw people, and I met people that were having the same experience as me. And so I came up with the title, We Empowerment, and we're stronger together, because I'm not the only one that's grieving something or someone. And so together we can get through this process. So that's how the name came about and the life coaching came about. So what I have found, though, is that I have been doing not grief counseling, but counseling as a life coach with people dealing with everyday life. And so I've been talking to a lot of young adults with their struggles and going through life and things that they're experiencing. So haven't did the grief counseling yet, but I'm still here if it's needed. But now I just want to be a well-rounded coach for anybody, whether it's seniors, young adults, or children. Children are my passion. And I do have a nonprofit organization called P.R.A.Y Ministries, which is Pure Righteous Anointed Youth, where we go out into the community and we help the kids that are in need with book bag drives. We do for the pandemic, we fed the homeless and gave out things to the homeless as well. But also in this life coach walk, I also have a scholarship fund for my mom called Ruby's Ribbons and Hearts. And that's dedicated to women that has breast cancer or any type of cancer, and also heart disease. And I am a makeup artist. And so with mental healthness, you want to feel good inside and out. So makeup line, my makeup, not a line yet, but my makeup title is Melanatedgoddess, mental health and wellness. So you can find me at We Empowerment Personal Life Coach on Facebook, or you can reach me at weempowerment@yahoo.com. And my telephone number is 1-757-774-8989.
Okay. Well, look, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Lifestyle Tonik, mental health, wealth, leadership, and culture. Remember, continue taking your dose of Lifestyle Tonik and let it refresh you as a good tonic should.